Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and oh boy, today we are doing our mid-season review of all of the drivers. But before we get into this, please like and subscribe, follow my Twitter, join my Discord server, join my league, and hey, let's get into it. In this list, there are 21 drivers. Yes, I know there's only 20 on the grid, but as you all know, Nyck de Vries got replaced by Daniel Ricciardo, meaning that 21 drivers have actually raced during this season. And of course, 21st place will be going to Nyck de Vries. Of course, he was sacked and replaced by Daniel Ricciardo. He didn't score any points and couldn't finish higher than 12th, which was his best result in Monaco, and had 6 races below a top 15 finish. It was sad to see him go, but it was the right move for Red Bull. And yes, of course, it was harsh, but F1 is a harsh sport. So, moving on to 20th, which I will put in as the one and only Logie Bear, Logan Sargeant. Yes, I know he's only a rookie, so take this with a pinch of salt, but basically, he's not doing terrible, it's just he's not showing that much potential in general. With his best result being 11th in Silverstone and 12th in Bahrain, meaning he has 0 points this whole season. But hey, it's his first season, and I know that's the same for Nyck de Vries, but in Williams it's a much less hospitable environment, so give Logan Sargeant some time, but I'm scared because he hasn't really shown me anything yet. And now, 19th for me, I'm probably going to get a lot of a stick for this, but I've put Daniel Ricciardo. Now, there is a reason why I've put him 19th. First of all, he's finished 13th and 16th in his races, which in an AlphaTauri is pretty standard. Nothing crazy, but okay. So of course he's on 0 points after 2 races, but also 2 races. He's only actually raced in 2 races this season, and it's a shame, but I think it's too early on to say anything about him so far, which is kind of funny because it's supposed to be a mid-season review, but for him, it's sort of hard to make a mid-season review for him, because I think it's unfair to judge someone who's only been in the sport for 2 races. That's why he's so low for me. So yes, take it with a pinch of salt, because technically I didn't really even want to put him in this list, but if I had to, I'd put him low, because obviously every other driver who's above him has had a good race so far. Even the likes of Magnussen and Bottas, who a lot of people think have had bad seasons, they've still had a few good races, which we haven't seen from Ricciardo, but of course that's because he hasn't had a chance to show us yet. So I hope that clears that up, but Daniel Ricciardo goes 19th. Then on to 18th, I have K-Mag. Now, the reason for this is he's had a few good performances, but they've mainly only been in qualifying, such as quali in Miami, he came 4th, but his best results have been 10th in Miami and 10th in Jeddah. Especially in the last 7 races, he's not been in the top 15 for each of those races, which is really bad. So will K-Mag get replaced next season? Maybe, maybe not, but it's not looking good for Magnussen so far. Then going on to 17th, and I put Lance Stroll here. Now, we've all seen the gap between Alonso and Stroll. Stroll's on 47 points, Alonso's on 149. If you can do the maths, that's 102 points gap difference, which is just too much. It's really starting to show in that Aston Martin that Stroll is a paid driver. With Stroll not even managing a podium yet this season, with his best performance being 4th in a very hectic Australian Grand Prix, which everyone has to take a pinch of salt with when using that as your best result because of how crazy the race was. Obviously, yes, he did good to get into that position, but if he had done that in any other race, I would have been like, okay, that's a very good result. But he doesn't deserve that Aston seat, and will be the reason Aston Martin get overtaken by Ferrari and the constructors by the end of the season if they don't improve, and potentially McLaren. So we'll see how that goes. But Lance Stroll, 17th. Then on to 16th, we have Valtteri Bottas. Now, Bottas, he hasn't had a terrible season because that Alfa Romeo is not very fast. With 2 good races in Bahrain coming 8th and in Canada coming 10th. He's consistently doing average in the low 10s, like 12th and 13th. He gets quite a lot. But I would expect him to be doing better as an experienced driver in F1 who used to drive for Mercedes. And considering he's basically on par with Zhou this season, considering this is Zhou's 2nd season, it's not that good. Maybe he will be retiring by the end of the season, or maybe Alfa Romeo will replace him, but he needs to do a bit better as he's supposed to be the team leader, and he's not really filling that role at the minute. Then 15th will be Yuki Tsunoda, and I know people are going to hate me for saying 15th Tsunoda, because I was looking through the results, and obviously I've watched all the races, and even I thought Yuki's done pretty good this season. I looked at all the qualifying, I looked at all the races, and yeah, he did better than Nick De Vries. But that's Nick De Vries. And yes, he's on par with Ricciardo for the last 2 races, slightly better at Belgium. But we haven't really seen what Ricciardo can do yet. And if this is still the Ricciardo from 2022, who wasn't actually that good, I don't see so much potential from Yuki. He's very far off that Red Bull seat, and I think that does come into consideration. Because of how bad Perez is doing, people just want anyone over him, and I like, put Yuki in that seat. But Yuki is nowhere near that Red Bull seat at the minute. I promise you that. Of course, he's had 10th 3 times this season in Australia, Baku, and Belgium, but he started off the season well, but recently he's been around the bottom 5 more often than not. So yes, not a terrible half of the season for Tsunoda, but could be a lot better. Then 14th, Guan Yu Zhou, and now I really think it could be between 15th and 14th, Zhou and Tsunoda. That's how flip-flop those two are this season. Because he's had a great season considering it's his 2nd season, same with Tsunoda, with both of them being relatively new to F1. But Zhou is still quite far away as well, same as Tsunoda, where he started off well with some of his results 9th in Australia and Spain, and had a great qualifying obviously in Hungary, coming 5th, but sadly was in a tangle in the first lap. He's showing potential, Zhou, especially in that Alfa Romeo, which is stinky this season, apart from Hungary, which it seemed alright in qualifying. But he's been on par with Bottas. Now again, is it that Bottas isn't doing well, or is Zhou doing good? I can't really tell. But 14th and 15th was really hard for me because Tsunoda and Zhou, I think, either way you put it, I think both of them are around the same level at the minute this season so far. Then moving on to 13th, we have Nico Hülkenberg. And well, what can I say? He's had a couple of masterclasses in that terrible Haas. Most of his bad luck as well has come from Haas, especially in Belgium. The amount of issues that car had, and obviously at the start in the pit lane, and he still managed to gain a few places. But like Magnussen and that Haas, most of his good results come from qualifying. Hülkenberg does even better in qualifying and more consistently. Like, listen to this. 10th in Bahrain, 11th in Jeddah, 10th in Australia, 8th in Spain, 2nd in Canada, technically 5th with the penalty, sprint shootout of 4th in Austria, 8th in actual Austria race, and so on for this whole season. He has been outstanding getting that Haas to where it shouldn't be. Of course, most of the time he drops back in the race, but what can he do when that Haas's race pace is that terrible? But so far, Hülkenberg's had a great, technically, rookie season. I bet Haas are loving bringing him in. Then on to 12th, which would be Sergio Perez. Now, I know quite a few people put him lower in their lists, but for me, of course, he's 125 points off Verstappen, which is not acceptable. But he's having a bad season, no doubt, but he's still 2nd in the championship, and people are forgetting that. Bear in mind, he's still managed to get 2 race wins and quite a few podiums. Yes, it's a dominant Red Bull car. I hear you saying that. I know, and I agree. But he still managed a top 6 position in each race except for Monaco, not taking into account the sprint races. So yes, it isn't the best season by far, and Perez could easily be replaced by a Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, even a Sainz, Russell, Alonso. Any of those drivers would be doing better than Perez in that Red Bull, but he's still playing the team game. He's still picking up points for Red Bull, and they will come first in the Constructors, and he will come 2nd in the Drivers' Championship. Now in 11th, you've got Pierre Gasly for me. Of course, he got that podium in the Spa sprint race, which was great for him. But he hasn't done much else this season, but you have to respect the podium. In that Alpine, he's consistently getting points around the low end of the points, around 9th and 10th. But, of course, I don't think he's done as well as Ocon, but it's a great start for Alpine, and I really do think Alpine have 2 great drivers on their hands, with Ocon and Gasly. And, of course, my 10th place will be Esteban Ocon, who again got that podium in Monaco, which was a great result for him and the team. He's really the same as Gasly this season, but just a little bit better, getting 8th 4 times this season in that Alpine, which is amazing. And of course, Alpine will probably come around 6th in the Constructors this season. They don't really have any competitors at the minute, considering McLaren have taken the jump up, and technically, I'd guess Aston Martin are the closest rivals to them at the minute, but there's no way they'll catch Aston Martin unless they have massive upgrades. But I think, yeah, Gasly and Ocon have had both decent seasons considering the car they've been given, and to both have podiums, it's a great result for Alpine. Now, moving on to 9th, which is George Russell. Not the best season for him so far, and I think most of you will agree. Of course, it hasn't been the worst, but I think he's just been a bit inconsistent with his crashes, and he's been really dominated by Lewis Hamilton this season. He's only had one podium to his name, but he's still consistently around the top 6 area, which is where the Mercedes has been all season. So yes, it looks bad with his crashes and all, but he's only had 2 DNFs, and his lowest finish without those DNFs is 8th. So yes, he could have done better, but people are over slandering him because he hasn't done that bad. So I'm hoping to see better things from Russell. He hasn't done terrible, of course. Having 99 points is still better than the Ferrari boys, but the Ferrari's obviously been worse than Mercedes this season. But yeah, he really needs to improve if he wants to keep up with Lewis Hamilton. Now, moving on to Carlos Sainz. Of course, he's made a few mistakes, but he is very consistent in that Ferrari. Has almost been on par with Leclerc. And of course, without Ferrari being Ferrari, he would have had a few better results. He hasn't had a podium, which isn't very good, but he's constantly coming 5th or 6th. He really is a great driver to have in your team with that consistency. 92 points so far. I'm hoping to see him on the podium next half of the season. Slightly worse than Leclerc though, but still very good. Now, moving on to Oscar Piastri. He's obviously in his rookie season. He's already had a podium in the Belgium sprint race, and he should have had another one in Silverstone, but got very unlucky with the safety car. And compared to Lando Norris, he's actually keeping up with him, especially in qualifying. Race pace, he still needs to improve quite a bit, I think, because Norris seems to get the better of him in races. But overall, even before the McLaren got the good upgrades, he was still putting in good results for that tractor of a car, getting 10th in Monaco, pinch of salt 8th in Australia, and of course he even started way at the back in Austria and made some amazing overtakes. He's had a really good rookie season, and I expect to see more from him if McLaren can keep it up for the next half of the season. Alexander Albon, now he has put in masterclass after masterclass in that Williams. He is so talented, and it really is showing people this season, completely destroying Logie Bear, but that really is to be expected, with his best result being 7th in Canada, where he had a defensive masterclass, 8th in Silverstone, 10th in Bahrain, and realistically, if Williams bring a few upgrades, Albon will get them 7th in the Constructors, considering he has solely put them there at the minute. So great job by Albon. I expect to see more from him in the next part of the season. 5th, I have put Lando Norris. Of course, he had got back-to-back podiums for McLaren, the first time in over a decade that has happened. And of course, recently in Belgium, even when that car was set up for rain and could barely go down the straight, he still managed 7th, pulling a masterclass on that soft stint at the end of the race. Great season so far. I hope that McLaren can keep it up. And even still, when McLaren didn't have those upgrades, same thing with Piastri. He still managed, pinch of salt, 6th in Australia, 9th in Monaco, and 9th in Baku. Considering that car, for some points, was the worst car on the grid, that is an insane achievement for Lando Norris. And I expect to see him on the podium quite a few more times by the end of this season. Maybe a win? Then on to 4th place, which is Charles Leclerc. Now, I know quite a few of you would put him lower, but for me, yes, he's had quite a few crashes. But at the end of the day, when you look at the stats, watch the highlights of the race, watch the races all together again, you'll realise just how many times he's pulled that Ferrari up to good positions. He technically got pole in Belgium, he got pole in the sprint race in Baku. He's had 3 podiums this season, with his best result being 2nd in Austria. Of course, without Ferrari being Ferrari, you'd have even more results as well. But I do think he has been slightly inconsistent, which is where he is losing to Sainz at the minute and why Sainz is so close to him. Because yes, he gets these great podium results, but some races he has finished as low as 11th. But I'd say it's a pretty good season so far for Leclerc, especially on 99 points, beating Russell in that Mercedes, which has been arguably better than the Ferrari for most of the season. Very well done. Now, on to my top 3. And to start it off in 3rd would be Lewis Hamilton. And my God, I think he's had an amazing season. Obviously, he's had pole position in Hungary, 4 podiums in Australia, Spain, Canada and Silverstone, dominating his teammate Russell. Hamilton has really been showing how to drive that Mercedes, with his worst result in an actual race being 8th. He hasn't had any DNFs yet. He's so consistent. 8th being your worst result is an insane start to the season in the car that isn't top of the grid. He has 148 points, 1 point behind Alonso. Looks like he could come 3rd in the championship, which would be a great achievement for him. Really showing he can still do it even today. So hey, Lewis Hamilton, 3rd place for me. Now moving on to the top 2. 2nd place, of course, Fernando Alonso. Wow, he's showing he can really still drive at his age of 42, which is insane. Could he beat Max in a Red Bull? I don't know, but he definitely would put up a lot more of a fight than Sergio Perez is. But listen to these stats. He's managed 6 podiums this season, with his best result being second in Monaco and Canada. And taking out sprint races, he has always finished in the points, even with Aston's recent decline in form. 149 points this season, he has really done well and shown he can still race. Now, on to first place, we all know it was going to be him, Max Verstappen. Of course, he has been dominating this season, only not winning 2 of the races, excluding sprint races. He's literally winning the championship by 125 points to Perez in second place. Literally, if he didn't turn up for any race beyond this point, he'd probably still win the championship. 8 race wins in a row is insane. He has literally had the best season of his career so far. So hey, what do you think about my driver rating so far this season? Comment down below where you think people should have been, where you think I've overplaced people or underput them. And hey, I'll see you all later on this week.